I try to spend time getting to know what their finances look like, but also try to understand a little bit more around, what do they want to do in retirement, which helps drive that spending.
So John, I appreciate you doing this interview with me today. Let's talk right out of the gates. Let's talk about the fact that you are all about finance. Since I have met you, all we've done is talk about money, investing, portfolios, all the stuff that would probably bore most people to death.
Yeah.
You love it. I do too, but you have a real strong passion for it. And it definitely, and we know in our experience, it doesn't come easy for everybody, right? So where is that passion coming from? Where's that? I know there's a story there. What's the story?
Yeah. I've always loved finance and money in some fashion, I guess. And loving money isn't really the right thing to say, probably. But the idea of some sort of small business, I think, probably came about from me growing up. I've always run different small businesses with my dad. And so I think back about my childhood, and we did things like selling baseball cards and splitting fence posts. And I was always in somewhat of a sell mode. So figuring out what maybe people wanted and then trying to position that product and then doing that sale. And probably that led to my love of finance and things like that over time. So that actual financial part of that in terms of trading started when I was in college, which was a few years ago now. And I remember
I saw some pictures of some longer hair and
I don't know
sports
about,
cars.
I don't know about that, but that could be true. And so I remember signing up for an E-Trade account, which was one of the first online brokerages back when I was in college. And so that's really where the financial and trading part happened. And then it was always something I was interested in. I didn't start out doing that immediately, obviously, but even throughout my years of working at Procter & Gamble, I always did trading on the side, always talked portfolios with folks, even in some of their retirement setups and things like that. So it's definitely always been a passion, but I think it was born and bred out of my childhood and growing up.
When you and I met, it was just casually at a local place, and we just started chatting in the corner for a while.
Yeah.
But eventually, you showed us a tremendous interest in what we were doing, and we were also interested in what you as a person were doing, and that passion, right? So yeah. Would you say that you found Stonehouse, that you were out looking for that opportunity, or would you say Stonehouse found you?
Maybe a little bit of both. So I remember you and I were coaching youth soccer together. So those were the days.
Good times.
Right, watching our kids run around and not really make progress kicking the soccer ball around. But anyway, it was always something I was interested in, like I said, while I worked at Procter & Gamble, but it wasn't something I was actively out seeking. So maybe things work out for a reason we don't understand. And you and I sort of met up, and I was impressed with what Stonehouse was doing in the sense of some of the active portfolio management, some of the way that they approach that client relationship. So I think it was a little bit of both in this case. It was something I was looking for, but I was not actively looking for it, but yet it came upon my doorstep.
You don't slow down. You don't stop working. You're working as hard as the day I met you. You were doing 2 jobs when we were first together, and now you're doing this with just as much time. So, what else got you to where you are today?
Started out down the engineering path with Procter & Gamble, worked full-time there with them it was just about 15 years of working with them. And I had done the overlap with Stonehouse for about 4 years of that time. And so now I've been with Stonehouse for 14 years.
That's crazy.
It's crazy how fast time goes. And so that was sort of the path that led me here. And upon coming to Stonehouse, my primary focus was really around client management and retention and those sorts of things. And since then, as you mentioned, I became a partner, but also now have full-time trading responsibilities, which takes up a good portion of my time as well for portfolio design, management, and trading. So those are really the 2 major hats that I have, trading and investments with our firm, and then client management as well.
Speaking of the trading side of things, you do, as you said, you do a lot when it comes to our trading, also our portfolio management. You lead our investment committee on weekly meetings that we run. Maybe another time we can talk about all the things you actually do week to week, and we as a company, but you as an individual do when it comes to managing those portfolios. But let's talk about, here we are talking, it's March 2022. We're still in the middle of this, or maybe just the beginning of this Ukraine-Russia situation going on over there. Without getting political or anything like that, this industry is super challenging.
Yeah.
And we talk every day to our clients about risk versus reward. Is it there for you? Do you just love the challenge of the day-to-day battle? Whether it's in the portfolios or trying to deal with client issues that they have going on in their lives. And is it worth it for you? You're 14 years in.
Yeah, I would say definitely it's worth it. I'm just as interested today as I was 14 years ago when you and I first started working together. I think I have a different mindset toward things than maybe I did in the past, which always happens as you get experience in a role.
Yeah, it does.
I try to keep some of the highs and lows a little bit less high and less low. Sometimes I'm good at that and sometimes I'm not. But I mean, in the sense of, part of this job that's most frustrating is really around returns in the sense of they're subject to the stock market. And as you mentioned, being in the throes of a war going on and some other circumstances, we try to do the best we can to control those, but it definitely can grind on one's psyche, and it's frustrating to see those things happen. And I do take this personally in the sense of you're working with folks' careers and lives, and it's all they have in retirement, and they sort of look at us as the advisor and say, hey, help me make this work. And so we're trying to do the best we can. And that's a job that I take very seriously. So can't get to the point where that causes you to go into a downward spiral, obviously. So I do a lot of things from, an outlook perspective to try to keep level and positive regardless of those circumstances. So it's definitely still worth it and something I still love today. But I think I approach it in a little bit of a different way than I would have in the first 5 years of that career.
I was just going to ask you that. Do you still have the same enthusiasm that you had 14 years ago? And how do you? Yeah. I think you do. I think you might actually be amped up even more than you were when we first met. And I think I'm assuming it's because you actually see differences you're making in people's lives. Can you talk about that a little bit? Yeah,
I would say that I'm definitely as enthusiastic as I was on day one. I think I have a little bit more of a seasoned outlook, as I mentioned before, around that. But I think that enthusiasm comes from, as you said, being able to make a difference in people's lives, as well as knowing more and different tools to bring to them. And so our business has evolved over the years as well, where I think, myself as well as our other advisors have more tools available to them to be better advisors and a better partner with our clients. So I'm happy about that. I feel like our business continues to make progress. I think if we were stagnant over those 14 years, I wouldn't be nearly as happy as I am today about being proud of what we can offer to our clients, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. Is there's probably multiple moments, but sometimes when whatever job you're working, you just love to have those days where you get in your car and go home and you're like, that's why I do what I do. Yeah. Like, can you think of one or maybe one moment where you're like that?
There's probably several, but I would say the time where I really feel that is when I worked with a client pre-retirement and then they call me and say, hey, I'm ready. And so it's a pretty cool feeling to work with them, say, some of them I worked with for 10 years now before they finally pulled the plug and said, I'm retiring, and I still have a couple as well. So I can think of specifically one person who I worked with. She wasn't really happy at the message that I gave to her in the first couple of meetings because we talked about her not being ready and not being at the place where she could enjoy her retirement the way that she wanted to. So the goals that she had, the income level that she was looking for just wasn't there. And so I had to deliver that tough message around, hey, let's work together on a plan of diversification of some of your assets, be able to get the right growth rates for you going forward. But part of that was, working in her case 4 years longer than she originally intended to do. And I remember her coming back to me and saying, boy, am I glad you had me stay a little bit longer. Because it ended up being even a little bit better than what she had originally targeted for based on some of the market returns and things like that occurred after. But that's one that sticks out to me. But I think several of those where you're getting a chance to work with folks and then have them retire is pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that story because as well as I do, it's sort of black and white, but it's so much more than that. And if a lot of advisors, a lot of people in our industry will just say, hey, you got enough. Or they exaggerate that they have enough, but they also might just say, oh, you don't have enough, come talk to me some other time. And they don't do what I think is the most important thing, which you do, John, is the coaching. Yeah. Like, hey, you don't have enough today, but let's see what we can do. Like you said, let's put a plan together to get you there. Like that makes all the difference. So you get stories like that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you saying that. Usually my approach with folks is I never say that they can't do something. It's just a matter of, well, you can, but here's what needs to happen to make that occur. So, you may not be able to buy that vacation house today, but if we do these 5 steps, hey, then it's a possibility and would make sense. So, I'd rather take that approach of figuring out what the plan could look like versus, I just don't ever see that happening.
Right.
Nobody wants to hear it. And sometimes that is the answer. But there's always choices that people can make to make their goals come true.
Perfect segue into my next question, which I used to refer to as the art and science of what we do. So the science is the math, right? We're math guys. Most people in our industry are math, based people. We like that. But a lot of our clients are not into the math, or they're not into this kind of math. But there's so much more to retirement and lifestyle, living expenses, income than just what's on paper. So how do you balance, what's more important, and how do you balance between the mathematical part of the financial planning and then the psychological issues? And I don't mean issues like people need help. I mean, but they just need some coaching and guidance. Like, how do you do that?
Yeah, it's funny that you say this is all about math. I mean, I have an engineering background, so I took 5 years of calculus, actually 4 years of calculus in college. So
that's
the math that
3 years too many.
Right, the math that we do in this business is significantly easier. So if you asked my clients and my coworkers, I'm probably into the math side of it, maybe a little bit more than the other side. But I think that I have a better balance today after working for several years. I try to spend time getting to know what their finances look like, but also try to understand a little bit more around, what do they want to do in retirement, which helps drive that spending. So, the rule of thumb is, 80 to 100% of your pre-retirement income is what you need in retirement. But if you're talking to a couple of clients who want to do a lot more traveling, then we maybe need to plan for a lot more than that.
Sure.
And so trying to get an idea of some of that stuff, and also really getting to look at what their current finances are with them. So probably back to a little bit of that math tries to set that path for me forward. So I'm probably a little bit more into the math side than I am the other side.
But you custom fit it for your client, right?
Right.
Yeah,
because
nice.
There's very few clients who really want to understand all the math in terms of the investments and why they are positioned from a future perspective based on some of the historical performance. But they all would like to know, hey, am I going to be okay in retirement? So am I going to have the type of retirement that I'm looking for? So that's kind of the question we try to answer.
Okay, so I have almost your last question here, and this is just a personal one. It's not business. And what I'm looking for is tell me or tell us something about you that most people don't know.
Well, I would say that most people who work with me probably know a lot about me because, I do want to share my story.
This is going to be seen by people.
I know, watch out. So in terms of what they wouldn't know, I would say most people probably wouldn't guess that I was super shy as a kid. I don't remember all these days, but my mom tells me that I cried every day going to kindergarten and most of first grade.
I can see that.
Yeah. And so I really didn't like to talk in front of people or anything of those sorts. And I was sort of a loner. Growing up in elementary school, and so a lot of that's changed. I'm not sure exactly what made that change and click. If I had to guess, it was probably athletics, and so being involved in wrestling and baseball and some other things like that, team sports and also some individual stuff there forced me to come out of that shell and do some things like that. And lo and behold, here I am today.
Well, thanks for sharing that. We've known each other for 15 years now, and I've not.
You didn't know that?
Did not know that.
All right, good.
That's great. Isn't it amazing? Like I think about that. I say that stuff to my family all the time. The 20-year ago version of myself could never do what I'm doing today. Yeah. And then you think about, the next 10 years and next 10 years. And
we'll say the same thing 20 years from now.
Eventually I'll max out.
There you go.
Last question here, and I promise. So I think you have a very keen insight to what I would call the life cycle of a client experience at Stonehouse. And by that, I mean, when people first come to us, they're usually referred to us by somebody. It's word of mouth or a strong referral. Sure. And because they were given that name by a friend or something, there's a level of vetting where they feel like, okay, I think I can trust these guys or girls or whatever. Yeah. And then then they become a client. And once they become a client, it's still we have to earn their trust, right? And it doesn't happen overnight. One thing we've learned is that takes a while.
Sure.
And then typically the third part of that cycle is now whatever it is, it's months, usually it's a couple of years. People start to get really comfortable. They stopped asking all the why are you doing this and what does this mean? And they get comfortable with our system and how we communicate with them. And they sort of hand the wheel to us and say, you guys drive. I want to go play. I want to enjoy my retirement. That's really why they were making this change in their life anyway. So you can't buy trust. Even when a close friend or family member says, I trust these folks, that individual still needs to you need to earn that from him or her. What are the things that you think that you do or we do to earn that trust over that time?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I would say there's a few things that I personally try to do. It's not something that I have a checklist that I sort of check off. Right. And so I would say that I try to listen to what is important to them and get to know that client over time. And so, and that's not because of any other reason than I actually care about their situation. I mean, that's why we're working with them. So I heard something the other day that I thought was interesting, and it was, you have to make sure that people know you care before they listen to what you say. And so I think it was said a little bit more eloquently than that, but
I probably said it.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that. But I mean, the point of that is somebody will know if you care. And so if they know you care, then they start to build some of that trust. And so the other thing that I try to do is really just work hard for them. So, you have to be an advocate for them, out there working with them, show them the plans, follow up on those things. And so that hard work needs to be accompanied by follow through on those tasks. So, if you're going on vacation and you're talking to a client, you can't tell them, well, I'll just get to that next week, when I have time. It's their life and it's their plan. So it needs to happen on time, every time. So whether it's myself or a team member that would pick that up, I try to never let things go much beyond 24 hours until that follow-up is done. And then also, if you make a mistake, you have to own up to it. So there's been times we all make mistakes. And so the key there is making sure that we make those right and own up to them. So I try to do that with my clients if I made a mistake in the past. So those are just probably a few of the things that I do to build that trust. And I totally agree with you. The clients have been with me for 10 plus years. We're in a much different phase than we were in the first couple of years. And so that trust is definitely something that's there. And then we need to make sure it never gets broken, because everybody knows if trust is broken, you just won't be able to rebuild it.
Yeah, that's a fantastic way to end it. I appreciate the time on this. And ladies and gentlemen, you've been listening to John Burke, Renaissance Man at Stonehouse. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, Bob.